Welcome back, weirdos. Weird Ward here with another series of weird tales for you. But first, an aside. If anyone wants to submit a story, let me know. I recently had to change channels and email addresses because some a-hole kept sending me pictures of my own house. Now on to the stories. I have 3 for you, and the first is an urban legend only uttered among cops. I like to call this one Bed Sheets. Well, I guess this isn't something that's going to make its way into any official police reports. So, 911 was called for a welfare check. It happens often. People don't hear from someone in a while, and police are called to check on them. It's almost always with elderly shut-ins, and in this case it was no different. A nearby patrolman was called to check on an unnamed widow. Neighbors hadn't seen her for weeks and concerns of her health were growing. The cop came and looked around. He noticed the pitiable state of the house, the old paint, the falling siding, the dying bushes. Despite the terrible appearance, there wasn't any signs of trouble. There were no broken windows or open doors. It was just a simple old house. The cop knocked, but no one came to the door. There was no response given to his yelling either. He frustratedly walked around the house, peering into the windows, but didn't see anything unusual. He then asked dispatch to call the house number. They had already attempted that before his arrival, but he wanted to see if the phone would ring and if it would cause any reaction inside. Less than a minute went by before he heard rings from inside, but it aroused no movement. He knew that he would have to enter, but something was unsettling. It was beyond the evidence given, more of a hunch. There was something about the situation that caused him to feel the converse coldness of his skin and warmth of his face. Maybe, he thought, it was the silence. He went into his car to grab appropriate equipment, a flashlight, and a pry bar for locked doors. He radioed in the current status report and stepped back onto the front lawn. He then felt that definite chill run down his spine. The ominous feeling setting in of being watched. Before taking a step further, he noticed something. White curtains that had been on the upstairs windows were now gone. That was where the feeling emanated. But what could have taken down the curtains from 4 windows in seemingly separate rooms? He wanted to call for backup but was afraid of being seen as a coward. Besides, he could have easily been wrong about the curtains. With his intense gaze on the upstairs windows, he took a timid step forward. Something else moved in opposition. There was indeed something up there. He shined his light up and noticed the curtain was still standing, but now it was in a different position. It was about a foot away from the window and held the head and shoulders outline of a human. The figure only occupied the bottom half of the window, which made it seem short, and the narrow shoulders let the cop know that whoever was under it must have been a kid. Another factor caught his attention. The light didn't reflect on the lower portion of the window. That meant it was open. That kid could hear him the whole time, and didn't respond. The cop called up to the kid and asked him his name and what he was doing there. Several seconds of silence followed. The figure gave no response, but was soon joined by another figure, also covered in a white sheet. There were now 2 children of similar height at the window. The cop quivered in response, but the absurdity of his fear caused him to continue. What are you doing up there? I'd like to speak to Miss... From his account, at least 6 more covered children stepped up to all the upstairs windows. He was done with this. He pressed the call button on his radio to request backup, and immediately, static closed the channel on him. He took his finger off, and the static continued. It got louder and louder and splashed in like waves. When he looked at the house again, every single window had covered figures in it. Static on the radio croaked and creaked.
Come in. Come in. Come in.
In an elderly woman's voice. Without any signs of motion or sound, the front door was now open, and what stood behind the doorway were two more covered figures. These ones were taller, and the outline implied that they were hunched over forward. The static broke with a much more clear,
"Come in, come in."
This was from the standard voice of dispatch. It broke his concentration on the house, and with a blink the windows were all empty now, and the door was closed. Utterly mystified, he responded to the radio. They told him it was a false alarm. There was no reason to investigate the property further. The house was no longer occupied. He should have remembered. He was there at that house before, when her body was found months ago. It looked so different in the daytime. He took the easy out and never reported what he saw. He just wanted to forget. But the next few weeks would cement that night into his head and raise even more questions than he had that night. The house burnt down the day after his visit, and in the rubble was the legacy of the elderly couple. The hidden legacy of a secret basement, cages, and chained-down remains of at least 8 children. Excavation revealed a dozen more bodies in the backyard. The ones in the basement must have still been alive the first time the cop was there. He could have saved them. He could have saved them. You know, I've been having trouble with stray dogs. I was about to go out and scare them away when I saw them in the window, but I refused to go out when I noticed their mouths moving. Listening in, it was obvious that they were talking about me. Okay, next is a story about a young lady with an admirer. This is Mystery Stalker. A woman moves into a new house, and in the first night of her staying there she awakens to bumping and long drawn-out scratching sounds coming from the attic. She tells herself that it's just rats or squirrels or something, but she's too afraid to check. She doesn't sleep well that night. The next day in the house she's preparing dinner and receives a call. She answers and it's silent at first. She turns to the receiver and hears a voice.
I can see you. If you hang up, I'll kill you. If you try to leave the house, I'll kill you.
She begins panicking. Her heart starts racing and her mind is spinning trying to process what's going on. What do you want from me? She asks in a worried whimper. She checks around. All of her windows are covered with blinds and curtains. He then says,
Oh, you don't believe me, huh? You just put some noodles in the microwave.
There's scraping and a few footsteps coming from the attic above. They go from directly above to the bathroom down the hall.
And the other girl is just getting out of the shower. I want you both to play a little game with me. If you cooperate, you might just live.
This is more chilling than any response that she expects. It's not the proposition, it's the confusion. Before she could think about it more, he says,
But you gotta tell that bitch not to try to look at me. If she keeps staring, you both will be dead in a matter of seconds.
You see, she was indeed heating noodles, but something confused her. So she tells him, I live alone.
No, the bitch in your... Oh, what the fuck?
Loud, almost inhuman screams come from the attic in the voice of a man. The whole house shakes and things fall off of shelves. The lights flicker. A voice, too deep to belong to the man, too deep to belong to any human, roars out. She runs out and calls the police, unwilling to ever go back. The police come and find the house in shambles. It looks like a storm blew through. The tall furniture is all fallen over. The dishes have all fallen out of cabinets and smashed on the floor. They go in the bathroom and notice that the ceiling to the attic is torn wide open, and the floor is wet. In the attic they find nothing but the rubble of the bathroom ceiling. At first they think that some intruder fell through the ceiling and tore the house up, but the pattern doesn't match. Whatever put that hole in the ceiling was going from the bathroom to the attic, not falling. They never found the intruder, but it's believed that it was a neighbor who is now missing. I was a really dumb kid. When I was little, I remember finding part of a human skull in the woods. I thought it wasn't real because when I put it to my face, it was much bigger. I wish that was the last time I visited my schizophrenic grandmother. One more story. This one's about a person's aunt, and it seems like she's the fun kind of aunt. I hope hijinks ensues. This is My Aunt. My aunt is a great woman. She's done many things. She's been around the world, she's volunteered with many services, and made a huge impact on the people wherever she stayed. If you talked to her, you would find it impossible to avoid smiling. She was just so much fun to be around. I love her very much, or at least what she was before. It'll be years before she's free, but it doesn't matter. She'll never be her again, and I'll never see her, the real her, again. She's been in prison for about a year now, and she sends the craziest shit. I don't even understand the letters anymore. It all seems deranged, and the drawings she sends, they're downright creepy sketches. My mom keeps a huge stack of them in her closet. I don't look at them anymore, not even the ones addressed to me. I love my aunt very much, but I just can't read them. I just want the woman I knew back. The last time I saw her happy old self was when she came over to get her dog, Molly. She left it with us for a week while in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. Her teeth were noticeably white in contrast with her newly tanned orange skin. We received some gifts from her. I got an offensive shirt that I wasn't allowed to wear at school, and my mom got a decorated handbag. She seemed very exhausted, and my mom asked her to stay the night. I got excited because, as I said, she was a blast to be around, but she was desperate to go home and sleep in her own bed. She started the 20-minute drive around 9 p.m., and after about 5 minutes of driving, Molly started barking at the passenger side window. When my aunt looked, she saw him, a man standing in the window. He wore a black suit, and his balding head was pale white along with his long, skinny fingers. His hair was gray and wild. He had very few teeth, and he had no eyes. They weren't in his reflection at all. I remember her description of him very well because of all the sketches she sent my mom. I can't find them now. It seems like the pencil wore off from the ones I can find. They're all just blank pages with torn holes to show his absent eyes. It scared the living shit out of her, and immediately when she saw him a chill ran down her spine, and she started to feel goosebumps as her eyes welled up. He was just standing there, along with her moving car, but very much in the reflection. His full figure was there like he was standing from far away, but somehow in the car. She couldn't understand it, but it immediately terrified her. Her attention went back to the road, and she had trouble seeing through her tearing up eyes. Her dog's barking got her to take another glance. His face, just his face, was in the reflection. It seems he was very close now, and all minor details of his face could be seen. He was unshaven and wrinkled, but his eyes, he still didn't have any eyes. Now, it looked like his mouth was saying something because his mouth was moving. My aunt could only hear Molly's barking. She screamed the moment she saw him, and her screams broke into complete crying. Keeping her eyes on the road was getting harder as she wiped away tears. She wanted to stop, but the idea of stopping on the side of the road in such a dark, wooded area with whatever the hell she was seeing was even more scary than continuing. She just kept going and accelerated a little, hoping to reach a gas station or any public area soon. When she looked a third time, she saw nothing. Her sobbing lessened, and she tried a breathing exercise. She was trying to calm down, but she couldn't get Molly to stop barking. This continued for about 5 minutes, Molly barking at a blank window and running from seat to seat in the car. My aunt was trying to focus on other things. What groceries would she need? How long has it been since her last oil change? When she noticed the car was silent. Molly was quiet, and she noticed movement in her rearview mirror. She saw Molly dangling by her neck with a long, skinny white hand wrapped around it. He was behind her, and his face was much clearer now. But his eyes still weren't there. She could see right through his head. She felt his long fingernails scrape her neck as he wrapped his cold hands around her. She couldn't scream, she couldn't breathe, and she couldn't move at all. Her foot sank into the gas pedal and he spoke. Her claims of what she heard have changed several times, but now she says that when he moved his mouth, she could hear his voice deep and raspy.
Turn around now. This is your last chance. Turn around now.
All of the light started to leave her sight as she was losing consciousness. She thought she would hit a tree or flip over in a ditch. It felt like an eternity of him squeezing her neck tightly. But in the time it took for him to give her the warning, it was over. He released her, and she was now alone in the car. This was confirmed as soon as she could move. She turned around and saw nothing in her back seat. No one was there, not even Molly. She looked back at the road and wiped the tears from her eyes. That's when she saw him, a 6-year-old boy standing in the road. He was so close that hitting the brakes had little to no effect. She screamed while the tires screeched on the road and she came to a stop. He was sent flying forward and was laying on the road with a trail of blood leading from where he landed to where he stopped sliding. He was still alive when she got out and ran to him. She called 911 and tried everything she could to help him. Her nursing skills were useless as he quickly slipped from unconsciousness to pulselessness. He bled out before she could even explain what was going on to the dispatchers. While she waited for the ambulance, and feverishly trying to do everything to save the apparently dead boy, the image of the eyeless old man went through her head, and the realization that she was now alone with whatever in the hell it was came into focus. Her heart began racing, and she was shifting and turning everywhere. The police arrived on the scene first to find her slumped over the boy, covered in his blood, and staring at the trees with her eyes wide open. Never a blink as the EMTs examined her, and police put everything together. She had a nervous breakdown and wouldn't talk for days. When she did, people thought she was trying to get away with a crazy plea. But she pled nolo contendere, no contest. The charge was involuntary manslaughter, and she was given 8 years because of how it happened. People thought it was odd that the family refused to file a civil suit against her. When asked why, the mother gave an answer that no one expected. Her son was still in his bed 30 minutes before the police came to them with the news. She knew this because she had to check on him often. You see, he had an imaginary friend, an old man with no eyes. He tried to sneak out often and would always blame it on his friend. She also couldn't understand how he had walked 5 miles within that 30-minute period. I honestly heard her say it. 5 miles. I can't even walk 5 miles in 2 hours. My aunt's explanations get more and more crazy every time. Some of the last letters for me that make any sense at all are about the prison, the food, the activities, the COs, the prisoners, and him. She still sees him in reflections, reminding her.
Why didn't you listen?
Well, weirdos, thanks for sticking around this long. And I would like to say that one of the stories I told you is completely true. I can explain more about it someday, but not now. you probably won't be able to guess which one. And don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Hell, don't just hit them, smash them, ram them, hump them. Put your device on the ground and hump it till you hit those like and subscribe buttons. And now, a really bad limerick for you. In darkest voids the killer makes his catacombs. Above it, he writes his tome. After you have read, you realize with dread, a hidden basement. You're in his home.